Okay, stand by, guys. Here we go. Let's bring in Peter Schiff, a man who saw the credit crisis coming and now sees another one at hand. Peter, in your Wall Street Journal piece this morning, you say that house prices will dive another 20% at least. Why?
Well, I didn't say they would necessarily dive 20% this year. My point is that housing prices, based on historical measures, are about 20% above where the trend would be. But given the weakness in our economy and the glut of houses on the market, not only today, but the bigger glut that will be there tomorrow, housing prices right now should be considerably below their historic averages. And I think they will get there. But it doesn't have to be through a big drop in the price of houses. It can also get there because the price of everything else but houses goes up.
Yeah. Just to explain that, because the methodology is quite simple. You basically took the house price index and you get a line that goes up and you say, actually, it should have just risen by 3.5% over the last couple of decades. And that's where the difference comes. Just talk us through it.
Well, over the last decade or so, I think since 1998, between 1998 and 1996, housing prices went up almost 20% a year. I mean, that was unprecedented in U.S. history. That was because of all the lax lending standards and artificial cheap money coming by the Fed and all the speculation that was created by Freddie and Fannie and government mandates to extend credit to subprime borrowers. So that was the aberration.
Sure.
And prices started to fall. That's part of the correction. But they still haven't fallen enough because the government is still artificially propping them up.
Peter, I have a question for you here, and I think you wrote an excellent editorial. I really encourage our viewers to read it. But when you show that excellent graph in your editorial that the market got as frothy as it did in 2005, 2006, into 7, and you were calling for, I think, just a reversion back to mean. In other words, just back to trend. When a market gets that frothy historically, it actually then overshoots to the downside. So isn't 20% actually being somewhat careful? Don't you think that we need a bigger correction than that?
That's what I mentioned that in my piece. I expect at least 10% below trend. You know, when pendulums swing far to one side, they go to the other side before they go back to the middle. And, you know, when you look at what the economy is going to be like in the years ahead, we're going to destroy so many households because a lot of children are going to move back with their parents. A lot of grown parents are going to move in back with their children. I think a lot of Americans are going to start taking on boarders. So you're going to have a glut of property on the market. We're going to have a lot more people who are unemployed, in the next couple of years than there are today. So this is terrible for the housing market. And, the Federal Reserve is creating all this inflation because they're trying to correct the problem with inflation. But, wages are not going to rise. That is the huge problem. Prices will rise, but not wages.
Sure. Peter, number one, I do hope that the editorial you wrote does alert some folks to how big the problem could become. You're saying it is there already. I'm saying that because their lending standards, not so much for the unqualified borrowers, but for the regular folks, Joes and Janes, who would be very qualified, the banks still are not lending because they've moved up those, basically the FICO scores so high that very few people meet it. If they actually kept the 20% down numbers and kept that there and yet actually had people qualify for the loans, I think you could meet many of these demands that are out there.
The problem is most people don't have the 20% down unless you let real estate prices come down. Right now, people are still buying homes with 3.5% down and FHA guarantees. We have to stop that. We have to let real estate prices fall to the point where people have the 20% down payment and can qualify for a mortgage without the government co-signing it.
Peter, I think you're overly pessimistic, and this is why I would argue I enjoyed the article and I think it's important that people read it. But like buying a car, when people buy a home, they don't necessarily look at the total cost of that. They look at what they can afford each month. And in this instance, yes, the prices have fallen, which you center your article upon, but the cost of borrowing the money for that has fallen. Larry remembers 15% rates on mortgages. You can get them at 4 or 5. That potentially will make up the 20% gap in affordability that you recognize as the price difference.
Well, the only reason that you have that affordability is because interest rates are temporarily low.
But it's real. You can lock in. It's real, and therefore the effective price of property is far lower.
Well, if you take an adjustable rate, even if you take a 30-year fixed rate, in many of these overpriced markets, it's still a lot cheaper to rent, even with these rates. And, of course, you got to remember that you have property taxes that are going up, you have maintenance, you have insurance, you have other costs of home ownership. And I think when a lot of people were buying homes, They were buying homes because they wanted to make money. Realtors were telling people, you're throwing money away on rent, you got to get rich, you got to buy real estate.
I tell you what, let me bring in Brian Kelly, because he's got some trades on what you're saying. Brian.
Well, so, hey, Peter, it's Brian. I'm curious. It sounds like you're talking about this glut of homes, and it sounds like you're betting that housing prices will fall, inflation won't rise. So would you be shorting copper here? That seems to me to be the play on what you're saying.
No, I'm long commodities. The Fed is going to keep creating inflation because it wants to stop real estate prices from falling.
So
they
we
won't
so
succeed,
we don't have to worry
but they
about
will make other prices rise. Excuse me?
We don't have to worry about our house prices falling, then, is what you're saying.
Well, no, they're going to fall in real terms. Yeah, maybe they won't go down by 30.
But the average American won't understand that, right? The average American is not going to see that.
But they'll feel it when they have to rent out, their spare bedroom so they can afford to heat their house. Americans are going to be a lot poorer because of what the government is doing. And it doesn't matter if they prevent your house from going down in value, if the price of everything you need to buy, from food to energy, skyrockets, so that the real value of your house shrinks that much more.
Patty, what's your take?
I'm actually a friendly face for Peter here. I actually agree with what you're saying. I think you might be a little more pessimistic than I would be, but frankly, this inflation scenario, in my mind, is exactly the problem. When you start looking at where people are going to be spending their money, it's going to be a huge problem. So, Simon, to go back to what you were talking about when you were saying that things were so cheap, the problem goes back to what we were talking about on the loan scores. You can't get a loan. I mean, there's one of the guys on Fast Money who's trying to get a house settled, and he can't get things straightened out. If someone on this show can't do it, who can?
Okay. All right, Peter. Thank you ever so much for joining us. It's a great article, a great editorial. And don't forget, everybody, Peter is the author of the book, Why an Economy Grows and How It Crashes. Tomorrow's 5 p.m. show will reveal what could go wrong in 2011. But more on that in a few moments. Let's get the trades on this, Steve. Where do you see people potentially making money here? Short the house builders?
Yes, that's exactly it. To keep it very simple, and I did this trade as of yesterday. I'm short the XHB against an S&P long. XHB and most of these builders, anything housing related, had a fantastic December. Most housing related shares are up double-digit percentages in December.